everyone. You're watching Speak Your Mind with Dr. Ryger. I'm Nezha Alawi, founder and CEO of Join Mayshad, the New York-based company that empowers women on a daily basis. I am here today with Dr. Risa Ryger, our clinical psychologist and investor in Mayshad, and our guest today is Jan Mercer Daff, our VP development, but also great personal branding leader. Today's theme is communication in the new digital world. Hello, Dr. Ryger.
Hi, Neza. How are you doing?
Well, our little routine is to start with telling us a positive story about your week. So I was not going to forget this week.
Well, let me tell you and to share with our audience, welcome everyone. We're thrilled that you're here today joining us. And last week, if you had tuned into the show last week, at one point, I turned around because I had heard a noise and then made nothing of it. That was during the storm. And about an hour after the show ended, I looked out the window and I saw a massive branch from a massive tree that had come down onto my yard. And fortunately, nothing was damaged and lawns can be repaired. But if we talk about something positive that happened in the last week, that I had power and we were able to record the show, which turned out to be a great show, and about patience, and then also that we were all safe and sound and able to be back with you this week, as I just got my internet on yesterday. So just in time for everything. How about you, Neza? What was positive from your week?
So my week was positive. I still have that feeling that it just goes so fast. Today I was speaking to our rising leaders, our mentees, and I just felt that I was having that weekly workshop with them just 2 or 3 days earlier. And I would say that from my week, not only all the great work that we do with women, but working with the rising leaders, young college girl this summer was always very positive and very fulfilling, the mentorship part. So, on today's show, during times of crisis, we all crave a little more human interaction, compassion, and empathy. And yet, we understand that right now, so much of our communication and interaction has been reduced to a Zoom square, a conference call, or a text. Dr. Ryger, can you tell us a little bit about your point of view on communication? Is it just through the words?
Oh, Nessa, what you're talking about is so important because what we really are looking for and what we crave as human beings, even if we don't know it, is that we're really looking for a kind of an integrated communication and an integrative communication in which what we look at and what we notice is patterns that feel right and patterns that may feel off. So that, for example, for people who are talking and their body language isn't in alignment with what they're saying, we can notice that there's something wrong. I mean, we may not even be really aware of it, but we can just have that uncomfortable kind of feeling about it, even if we don't quite know what seems off. And so what we're looking for and what we try to do, and certainly in our human interaction, is that we look to go beyond the words. And we look to go beyond the words into authenticity. We look to go beyond the words into a way that we can connect, a way that it can make sense for us. And so when we're on screen, it's a challenge because right now the way that we get to communicate most is really through our eyes, right? We're looking. And I was talking to a colleague last week, and we were talking about how that when we're on Zoom calls, and of course we love to be on Zoom calls because that's the way we get to connect and to be together when we can't be together physically. So this is a wonderful way to do it. But that we often can feel like we're in a staring contest. Remember when you were kids and you'd have a staring contest, because that's the way that we communicate and we show that we're involved and we're interested, and we can't really veer from the screen. It becomes very hard to even veer from, kind of where your eyes are focused at the moment, because it feels like you're tuning off, that you're disconnecting, so that we feel this need to kind of stay front and center and almost not blinking if we possibly could, because this is how we connect in our worlds right now.
Yes, and the body language is so important, and so how do we do to compensate for that now that we're behind a screen?
That's a great challenge of our time. Now, you may have noticed, if you're in this show and if you're in other shows, in Speak Your Mind, that I have a tendency to bring my hands up and to use my hands when I'm speaking, just as another way of bringing a little bit, not only more animation, but not from something an artificial way, but from a communicative way, that we want to use our bodies. We need to communicate in a way that goes beyond our words. I mean, what we know is that only up to 7% of our communication is about our words, and the other 93% is about everything else that we bring to our communication. So how do we bring our humanity? How do we bring our presence when we're in two dimensions? And so it behooves us to become more aware of what our bodies are doing, what we're feeling in our bodies when we're on a Zoom call. Are we, are we stressed, or our shoulders up? Are we communicating tension in how we're holding our bodies? Are we communicating interest? Are we communicating, kind of like so laid back that you could be, sitting in a lounge chair somewhere? And that can be fine, but to also keep in mind what you're doing, what the purpose is of your call, whether you're on a professional call, a personal call, who you're speaking with, and so that your body can be in alignment with what you're saying and what you want to communicate. So that even if you were in a room in a meeting, would you be kind of like sitting back? I know I'm out of screen in the place I should be right now, but sitting back just in poor posture, or do you want to be communicating that you're present, you're ready, you're listening? It doesn't have to be overly stressed, but that you're in a state of readiness and receptivity.
It is. It's so important, and as a psychology expert, we got to talk also about the other side of bad communication. Is we can hurt people with just the wrong postures and without the words sometimes. Can you tell us about that?
This happens a lot, and one of the things that I tell to the leaders that I work with, and for people who are running meetings, is that there's so much that you can communicate that's under the radar, or it seems under the radar because it's not communicated, but it becomes a very powerful communication. And so in meetings, and depending on how your screen is set up, and we can have screens where we can see different people at different times and all, that people, when we give people more of our eye contact, we are communicating something very positive to them. And when we are not giving people eye contact, and people may not even be aware of it, when we're not giving people eye contact, that it's a nonverbal communication that says, I'm not thinking positively of you. I'm really not paying that much attention to you. There was the other person who I really stayed in visual contact with and focus, not only with my eyes, but in body language. And so becoming aware of your nonverbal communication, becoming aware of even that little, when there's one person who's communicating, who's talking versus another really sends out very important messages, not just for you to that individual, but it's a messaging from you to your whole team about how you feel about different people. And so in order to really get control of your communication, not only do you have to get control of your words now and really think carefully, because words are going to have more impact in the absence of other information, but that with your nonverbal communication, with how you posture your body, your eye contact, your facial expressions, micro expressions in your face, that you're messaging to that person and to your team who is the who for you.
I studied in a hotel management school, and we had an entire course because in the hospitality industry, you are put in front of customers. And so that body language, the expression is so important. A big part of the delivery of the service counts on that. And we had an entire course on all the the nodding when you're listening to someone, the humming, that was interesting. Yes, it is. It's an important part in the professional look at people, but in their personal life as well. And sometimes we can not be in a negative mindset, but we can neglect our way of communicating, not just with the words, and we can sound like we don't care about a situation, for instance. So Jan is here with us today. Jan, I'm not going to go through your bio. Everyone knows you. I've reminded everyone as well. You are a rock star when it comes to personal branding, and so do we. The three of us. That's why we're here, because we know the importance of working on our personal branding, on being a brand ourselves within our industry and our community. So can you tell us a little bit about this and about the difficulties that you see in women that come to you, that can be very talented, very successful to a certain point where they could be more successful, and they're lacking that personal branding attitude?
Absolutely. Hi, everyone. So excited to be here again. I love Dr. Risa, the Ryger show. So this topic, I think, is incredibly important as we're launching into month number 5, month number 6 of COVID. And I think what's happened is that like we all have COVID fatigue. We have Zoom fatigue. We all thought we were going to be going back to normal in August and September. And we think now that the world is going to look very different from what we originally anticipated when COVID first struck. And so the way in which we show up now is so incredibly important for our personal brands, of course, Neza, but also the way in which we want to tell the story of the purpose, the vision, the mission of our companies as well. And, we hear this constantly from women that in month number 1, month number 2 of COVID, everyone was showing up with their best face forward, right? Hair was still, we still had color in the hair. Our faces still looked amazing. We were still putting on makeup. We were still dressing. We were still really paying attention to the look and the feel of how we showed up. Now we're a few months into it, and we're realizing a couple of different things. That number one, there are incredible gender differences in the way in which men and women show up. And so many women in our ecosystem have said, look, like I feel stuck. I feel like this is a catch-22. Because if I show up in the way in which I've been socialized to show up, which is erring on the side of perfection, but yet I might be in a Zoom meeting with my other male colleagues who are at my level, and they're wearing baseball caps or t-shirts, or maybe they haven't shaved for a while. Like, what kind of message is that sending to the company? Because they're truly also representing the company, particularly when they're external people on Zoom calls as well. But then how is that showing up for me in the sense of I'm creating a sense of difference for myself, right? So pros and cons to that. And I think for we as women, we really have to assess, like, do we want to stand out? And there are moments and times where it's incredibly important to stand out. But then also there's also moments and times where it's incredibly important to be a part of that corporate culture, right? So many women have now said, look, like I'm not spending as much time and attention because I need to be seen as a part of the team. I need to be seen as a part of the gang. And for me to have the same level of confidence and trust in others as they also perceive and trust me, I have to look the part, right? So I think it's number one, incredibly important to know your audience, right? To understand who are you being seen by, who are you communicating with, what is the end goal of the conversation, and tailoring how you show up in that way. We're also seeing so many other things in the sense of the ways in which we use social media. And we can talk a bit more about that in the show about that as well, and how that's evolved over COVID as well.
That's very interesting. What you're talking about, the gender difference on how people show up on Zoom. And Dr. Ryger, I have a question for you on that, because if we look at history, few centuries ago, men used to wear wigs, used to wear makeup, used to dress up and make as much effort as women. And then if we just look in the 60s, 70s, men were still doing not as much, but still doing a lot of efforts with their hair, their way of dressing up. And then when you look at the 90s and the 2000s, and men make zero effort, and that's what makes them look good, And so how can we explain that change in the psychology of men? Are they more confident? The fact that they've been in professional life for a long time makes them that the criteria for confidence are no longer in the look, but probably in other criteria. Now women are catching up by wanting to be financially independent and professional. So where does that take us in few years/centuries? Are we going to shift? Is there a possibility that we end up shifting from making as much effort on our look at some point?
One of the questions is, I love this question. And one of the questions is, who are we showing up for? And Jan, your question and your response about being part of the team, not being part of the team, is really a very important one. And so one question is, who are we showing up for? And there are times when we show up for ourselves by, putting on, clothing that we like or that we feel good in, or having an option to wear makeup, or perhaps even giving ourselves the option to not do that. I mean, we are at a point where the basic expectations in some respects have changed. Now, what's going to be interesting, of course, is when at some point, people return to the office, and do things just go back to the status quo? I mean, I don't know how many guys are going to be walking in with baseball caps into the office at this point. But I think that for one of the things that happened, at least for men, is when all of the tech and the .com kind of exploded onto the scene, that people who were working in that space were working very casually. It was not corporate. It was not corporate America and that basic look of corporate America. That's where, you had the T-shirts and the hoodies and that look, which was normative in that world. And so what happened, at least for a period of time, was that corporate America seemed very out of sync with that. And they seemed very detached and disconnected and kind of out of it. And so there was more of a move towards, kind of taking it back a couple of notches. And so you didn't have to have your tie on. And there was dress down Fridays or casual Fridays. And so there's transition for everyone in here. But I think that one question that's important is, who are you dressing up for? How do you want to show up? And what does your professionalism look like for you? And one question that I'd love to throw out here also is that when you were talking about showing up, that if you're on a call with other women and you come on all dressed up, and just from a particular perspective, do other women feel like you're showing them up? Like if you come in more dressed, or more coiffed or more, kind of spending a little more time on your makeup or wearing makeup. Is that taken as, I see you smiling, Jen, is that taken as kind of like, oh, she's showing off or she's showing us up, or that there's some sort of, there can be a kind of a negative connotation associated with that?
Risa, I think that's such an interesting question, and it really gets to the gender differences across how we really think about our own self-worth, right? Because women, we're often in perceived competition with each other for everything from jobs, which there's a lot of historical data that indicates that as women were rising the ranks in the 60s and 70s and 80s, there were very few jobs available for women at the top. And so there was this incredible competition, intense competition for women and between women, right? And so we know that often women haven't historically played nice together in the sandbox. Now, that's also to say that there are so many millions of examples of women who have truly supported and championed and mentored each other over history and, over time as well. But there is something to be said about knowing your audience, knowing who you're speaking to, and knowing that the way in which you show up today may be entirely different than the way in which you show up tomorrow based upon who else is with you in that Zoom room. And I think that there's a way in which, again, it really goes back to understanding, what is the intent, what's the purpose, what's the ultimate objective of what you're participating in, particularly in the Zoom room, right? Or no matter what brand of communication device you're using. Understanding what is the product and service, or what is the ask, right? Like, what do you hope to get from this conversation? And then really tailoring everything from, your background to how you appear, to how you communicate, to how you lean in, how you lean out, in the same way that we mirror conversations and mirror communication in the real world. Like, we can still do that in the Zoom room. Nez and Risa, I love what you both have said about the communicating with your eyes, because there's so much now that we can really read into. Look, I think in this moment in time, we're going to become much better at communicating non-verbally, because we're going to have to overextend ourselves in that way to become better at it, right? Whereas in the past, it may have just been taken for granted in a way, right? So we're learning how to communicate differently. We're learning, where to look so that we're showing the other that we're really paying attention. And Nez, I may not be looking at you, but really you're looking at me now that I'm looking at you in the camera, right? So there are a lot of different tricks and tips that I think we, need to take into consideration, particularly when we're still communicating in the flat world.
And one thing is sure, since COVID started, phone calls are on the trend. Everyone wants to have your face. And people, would call me on FaceTime, and it's becoming the new normal. So how do you explain that as well?
I'll hop in to start this one, Jan. And I'm sure you'll have something. I know you'll have something to say, and I hope that you do, because you bring so much value. Thrilled to have you here today. That it's really about trying to connect, that people are really looking for connection. We are so disconnected in so many different ways. And right now, it may be that the people that we're spending time with on Zoom in a work capacity are the people that we're really spending the most time with. And so we're looking to get our connection from them. We're looking for that moment of humanity. And it really also gives us an opportunity in some respects, not only to develop more fully our nonverbal communication, but really to develop more connection with others. That in this environment, when we're all challenged in all different kinds of ways, is this an amazing opportunity, as we're in the two dimensions, to develop more trust with one another? How do we create more safety with one another? And so that people feel comfortable being able to communicate and feel that what they say is going to be held, and that we can develop more trust, more interdependence, because if nothing else, boy, do we know that this world is really so dependent on its survival through interdependence, which is very different than codependence. Let's not confuse the two. But that part of interdependence is a trust. And can each of us do something? Can each of us have part of our mindset in a place of bringing more trust into how we show up, what we do, how we treat others, and to help lay ground for a more trusting environment?
I'll add to that, Risa, and I absolutely agree with you. I think that also look like we know that when you meet someone in person for the first time, you have 7 seconds to make a good first impression. And if you don't make that first good impression within that 7-second time period, it takes another 7 face-to-face encounters, positive face-to-face encounters, for someone to change their mind about you. Right. And so now we're making a lot of first impression judgments based upon something that's very flat, the flat world. Right. And I think that the insistence on being with people in the physical space via the visual connection is incredibly important right now, because it says a couple of different things. It says, number one, I'm paying attention. I'm not multitasking while I'm on the phone with you. I'm not also homeschooling or doing dishes or doing laundry or worrying about this or, connecting with other teammates or whatever it is. You have my full attention, and you can trust in me that I'm listening to you, I'm paying attention, and that I'm respecting your time as well as respecting my time. And I think for many of us now, look, like we're conducting business, we're meeting with investors, we're pitching new clients, we're, many of us that have been furloughed or laid off are looking for new jobs. So that's an interviewing process. And so much of the world just has to move on, and we're figuring out how to do that. But when you're face to face, it's much easier to be remembered when they have that visual. So if you want to be remembered, if you want to be experienced, if you want your brand to be experienced, the face-to-face is incredibly important. Now, with that said, playing devil's advocate to that, there are some people that many conversations I've had where I actually ask a person, particularly if I'm just speaking with one person, would you prefer Zoom or would you prefer an old-fashioned phone call? And many times they want to do an old-fashioned phone call because they have Zoom fatigue. Right. So it's also important for us to keep in mind that we need to go where people want to be met at right now and accommodate and work to their preferences.
I've had voice problems over this COVID, and I'm working with the voice therapy, very renowned, where she works with singers, but also she worked with Amanpour and Christian Amanpour. So I'm learning a lot of things in the posture where it's just that there are so many muscles that are holding your vocal cords, and we're not used to speaking that much sitting in a position. And so it's all in the posture, it's in the breathing, it's in many components. But being on Zoom and being on phones for the past 6 months made it that, and being with masks when you're out trying to have a communication, like as you're running errands, makes it that we are overusing our voice. And so that's also another effect of the Zoom fatigue. But then, I think a big part also of the communication, that silent communication that we used to have, where we would be in an office together and everyone is working on something, but we are working together somehow. That doesn't happen when you're away. So you need to be on a Zoom together. Especially at the beginning, we were nonstop together. We were recreating the office space on a Zoom, except that you are not silently working. You're communicating the whole time, because you need that. That's the point of being on Zoom, is to verbally communicate.
Yeah, I want to just share something that that you guys really made me think about being here together with you. That you bring your brand wherever you go, and being your brand and having your brand doesn't mean that you have your own business. That if you're in a company, if you're part of a team, you still have your own brand, and that one of the challenges now is really, as things have changed and continue to change, and we're going to be in the next change, that you hold on to yourself, and you hold on to your beliefs about yourself, you hold on to your identity. And that when you can connect with that gets communicated as well. And so your brand is with you always. And I'll just have one fast share. I was running a workshop and the with a group of women, and this was about self-ownership and how do we own who we are. And so one of the exercises that I did, and these are women who did not know each other really, is that I had them just turn to whoever they were sitting next to and just say one thing that they've noticed about that person that was positive. And so it was fantastic. So what happened, these women, they just paired up, they faced each other, and one woman went ahead and said something positive to the woman in front of her, and the other woman reciprocated, and it went like this. Part two was, now say something positive about yourself to the person, to your partner. And I will tell you this without putting any judgment on it, but just from, experimental objective data, that there was absolutely dead silence in the room. In like one Mississippi, two Mississippi, until someone started to say something positive about themselves. And then there was the reciprocation. And it was just fascinating. It was absolutely fascinating that people, and this is part of your brand, is to be able to identify within yourself what's positive about you. We're all works in progress, hopefully. We're all on paths of growth. If you're not on a path of growth, that's a question for you to be asking yourself. But that there are many people who don't have at hand what they feel positive about themselves. And so this now, through this time of COVID, is really an excellent time and opportunity to really take a look in. Because if you're not living your brand, if you're not communicating your brand, it's time to take a look inside yourself and connect with who you are, what you feel positive about yourself, and what may need to be developed.
Risa, I'll even take this one step further, and I say that many companies are actually going through this process for themselves right now as a corporate identity, right? Figuring out exactly who you are, what you stand for, what you believe, and ultimately how you want to make the world a better place, right? And I think what COVID and Black Lives Matter and the protests and just all the changes that are happening politically, socially, culturally, and economically in our own country are causing all of us to do, particularly from the corporate perspective, is companies that are going to actually thrive and succeed and come out of this from a different way in which to look at profitability down the road. They're going to have to ask themselves these questions and become much more transparent about the value that they're really bringing to the table, and maybe redefining exactly what that value means, and not necessarily always from a dollar perspective, but really what are you doing to make the world a better place? And I think for us as individual women, we need to ask ourselves those very same questions. Who am I? What do I stand for? What is the meaning I want to create in the world? And what value do I bring to the table? And I think what I see happening in this moment in time is that many women, like, our careers are being completely uprooted in a way, right? Because we're not going back to what was, right? And so, Neza, you say a lot about, like, how do you want to define the future you want to create, and just go do it, right? It might be messy, it might be sticky, we might have to pivot, but actually take action and be proactive about that. I think a large part of that for many women who get stuck is to really pay attention to your history and heritage, and knowing that you're this wonderful sum of all of your parts. And you're not just who you are today, but you are who you are at your 20-year-old self when you just first started your career and you worked your way up the ladder. As a corporate executive, as a business owner, as an entrepreneur, you may have already pivoted a few different times, but don't forget that you have thrived and succeeded based upon all the decisions that you made along the way, and don't discount that. And I think in the same way that brands are figuring out how to stay fresh and relevant and current and competitive, they're looking at the totality of who they've been since day one, right? And really using that history and the heritage as a narrative, as your own story, in the sense of, now, how do you tell this story of your brand in a different way, in that 2.0, 3.0, 5.0 version of yourself, right? Women should be doing the same thing right now, in the sense of really thinking through, if I'm going to stay fresh and relevant and current in how I communicate, how I market, how I brand myself, how I show up in places like this and on my social media, really think through, like, what is that personal story that you want to tell that's really going to help you stay remembered?
And as we're saying that, one of the important pieces, as I listen to Neza, as I listen to you, and Jan, as I listen to you, is that you don't even have to go into, intense personal history and have that kind of share, but that your personhood can be communicated. And that it doesn't mean that there has to be some kind of massive disclosure or anything, but that your humanity, your personhood, your caring can be communicated and needs to be.
And you're talking about the 7 seconds in which you have that occasion to pitch yourself. And I think that 7 seconds with time, as we'll always be stuck in 24 hours a day, will shorten. So making that first impression as we're advancing in time will be faster. And so who can pitch themselves in 1 second? I'll tell you who. Someone who knows themselves very well. Someone who has spent that time with themselves and understand what is that one thing that I want to share. What is that one thing that I want to share about myself in this specific context? Today I'm in a professional context. Tomorrow I'm in a personal, social context, and so on. So knowing oneself is very important. And then, Jan, you're talking about my vision of be who you want to be. Project yourself. Stop spending a lifetime looking for yourself. Assess who you are. You and Dr. Ryger, you know it in psychology. We cannot run away from who we are and our past. We can fix things, but we need to assess who we are, to accept who we are, and then to project who we want to be with that person. You're not going to go who you want to be with someone else. You're going to go with yourself. It's you who's going to go there. You're not taking yourself to the supermarket and trading, like for another person who's going to take you there. And so I see also there are a lot of workshops that we're giving at Mayshad about personal business development, and there are a lot of workshops out there as well. And what we insist on in the work that we do in Mayshad is we want you to do a work that is gonna help you project yourself, but making sure that you're not projecting yourself in the skin of someone else. And I think that a lot of the content that is out there as tries, to take you in, you're here, you can be someone else. You can be someone else. You can change your life. Here it's like we're accelerating your life. We're making it better. But you have to stay with yourself, because you can invest a lot on shifting away, drifting apart from who you are. And you might be happy for a while because you're like, oh, I'm seeing results, but it will catch you. One day you will wake up and you're like, who I am, where am I? I can't see myself anymore on the mirror. This six-pack person whatsoever that looks amazing, that is not me. And that happiness and satisfaction and length. Life is a marathon, John. Didn't we say that? Life is not short. Life is a marathon. So you gotta work on yourself to be able to keep that pace for a long time.
That's so true. Life is a marathon. That's what 2020 is teaching us.
And to your point, Neza, which I think is so important, there's an illusion that we can leave ourselves behind. There's an illusion that we just turn a new page. That page is in a book, and there were pages that came before that page. And that this illusion that we're just going to leave it behind is such an illusion and a delusion, because whether we're aware of it, whether we're willing to acknowledge it or not, it is in us. It is taking up space. And if you're keeping it out of your awareness and working to do that, it takes energy to make that happen. And it may be that what you're trying to keep away is exactly what you need and what can be of help to you. So how do we integrate it and take along the previous pages? If you're taking the book with you, right? And you want to turn the page of your book, there's nothing wrong with turning the page of your book, but the other pages are coming with you.
Totally. Well, it was, again, one of the great episodes that we have. And I love Dr. Ryger, how every time we just go deep in analyzing the topics that we choose that are part of the life of every woman and our everyday life. And not only do we analyze, but we find solutions that are pragmatic that we can implement in our life. Jan, it was amazing having you with us today. And I hope that you're going to come and visit us on Speak Your Mind with Dr. Ryger from times to times. Your input is always so exciting. And I love this vibe here. Dr. Ryger, any conclusion that you want to leave us with on the importance of communication and personal branding?
Yes, remember that no matter what, whether you're an entrepreneur, whether you're a business owner, whether you're a team member, whether you're your brand in your own home, that take who you are. You take who you are to what you do. You take who you are in every interaction that you have, and that you are your brand, and be kind to that brand and grow it and develop it. That's one thing. And that the other thing, the other takeaway is that as you turn the page of your book, remember that you're taking the whole book with you. And so, again, if you have any questions, or if you'd like my free resource about courageous change, please contact me at drr@expertinchange.com. And remember, we love having you here with us as part of the sisterhood. And as always, we've saved a seat for you.